Soundstripe. Soundstripe. Soundstripe.
Welcome in, everybody, to the NFL Week 5 preview show with Uncle Phil and Smooth Andy. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Uncle Phil, Smooth Andy, how are you guys doing this evening?
Good, man. Ready to turn the page on a great college weekend, but an atrocious NFL weekend for me. Smooth Andy, you fared much better on NFL. Congratulations, man.
Thanks. Yeah, 7-3 on NFL. So forgot to send my tweet out though, which I typed it up and then put it up as a draft and was going to fire it off after the show, and I just forgot. I walked up to my desk Monday and it was still sitting there waiting to be sent.
You're kidding.
Yeah, but I was on the record. I was on the record on the show. So
yeah.
Really, if you listened, you got the picks. If you didn't, I guess I blew it. But I won't do that again anytime soon. I don't think.
Yeah. Well, good, because everybody will be looking for your picks next week. As good as you did. Look, man, let's in week 5, man, it's you're very contrarian in life in general, but particularly when you in the NFL, and that served you well. I mean, this has been a really unusual year so far. I guess I shouldn't say that. In our preseason preview where we broke down all the divisions, I was like, look, there's just no great teams, and I think Survivor contests are going to end early this year, and that was my prediction. And man, was I right? Unfortunately, I was a victim of that, and out early in Survivor this year, the earliest I've ever been out. Just so disappointed, but that is carried over into the NFL because there's no clear favorites this year. There's no clear dominant teams. I mean, there's a few at the top. We'll kind of discuss those, but just for instance, favorites of 5 or more points are now 5-19 against the spread. Just kind of keeping a running tally each week, adding to it. It's really, really odd. I personally don't see it changing with the way that, I feel like quarterback plays down. I feel like injuries this year seem to be significant. You kind of see the rebirth of running games this year. So I just don't see it changing. I mean, it felt like the underdogs are going to keep on rolling, continue on doing what they're doing. And I think that I'm going to switch my tactics because obviously I thought favorites were going to cover this week, kind of geared my plays toward that, and, got my head chopped off. Where you, the underdog master, looking for those opportunities, just had a great weekend and did it. I mean, do you see this changing to where favorites start covering? Because I don't know that I do.
Well, it's usually the way it happens. But I don't know. I don't really read broad trends. Usually when I have some good weeks like I've had in the NFL, I expect to have a bad one sometime soon, but it might not happen. I don't go into any week thinking, oh, this is the week I get my butt kicked, because I might not. I had a couple weeks where I made bets and didn't feel good about them. I was like, oh boy. And they came out great. So, So I don't know. I don't know if I can. Usually things are going to find their way to the mean
Right.
Because if you have a year where, dogs cover at 58%, that's just crazy.
Sure.
It shouldn't happen. And if it does, there should be a good reason, and I can't think of a good reason. And I mean, you're right. There's a lot of parity, and there aren't any great teams, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the dog has to keep covering.
Well, I mean, it feels like, the days of when, before you had a dominant Kansas City team. This was before Patrick Mahomes got paid, right? And so the team could be stacked. And you had a dominant New England team because Tom Brady, um, chose to not take the maximum deals and would take pay cuts. He, had Giselle, so he could not take the pay cut, or he could take the pay cuts and absorb those and not take max money, so he could kind of build rosters. And you had dominant teams. Now with the quarterbacks taking max money, you see Cincinnati with Joe Burrow is a different team. Kansas City, it obviously cuts into your depth, and now with Marquise Brown and Rashee Rice out, I mean, that team is really destined for receivers. So you're doing that. Baltimore's having to rebuild a little bit, but certainly didn't look worse for wear against Buffalo. You couldn't tell Buffalo that Baltimore was down. So it's an interesting deal. But let's kind of get to it. Some of the things that I had, initially, we kind of talk about some different topics, and one thing we kind of keep coming back to is MVP race and kind of legit Super Bowl contenders. MVP race last week I had Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, and I had Kyler Murray. This week I removed Kyler Murray. I renew. You scoffed at me with Jaden Daniels because he's a rookie, but he's had the best 4 weeks completion percentage wise, not of a rookie, but of any quarterback ever. And he just erased one of Tom Brady's records for completion percentage. So, I mean, the guy looks legit. He looks like, you're comparing him to Lamar Jackson. There, some people are, and maybe he is, but Lamar Jackson's never been as accurate as this. So, and he's a little bit thinner, obviously, and that's the risk of him potentially getting injured. But I still kind of keep Josh Allen up there. I think he's legit quarterback, but I think he's just kind of get into some of my frustrations as well with Sean McDermott. I just don't think he's coach well. I think he's limited. Got a defensive head coach, and man, in big games, does it show? We'll talk about that as we kind of get along. Sam Darnold. No regression there. People are like, oh, he's going to have a bad game now that he's going on the road and he's going to have his bad game. And sure enough, he did not sit squarely atop of that. And Lamar has kind of come back as well. Looked fantastic against the Bills. Bills had some injuries to some linebackers. They're coming back this week. Will make a difference. But certainly Lamar exploited those plays this week. Do you have a favorite among those four, or am I missing one that you don't have? Or that, I mean, I certainly, you made pushback a little bit last week for Patrick Mahomes. I pushed back, and I still push back. He's not having his year. He's had 5 interceptions this year, and 4 have just been absolutely ugly. Just really ugly. And his 1 interception first quarter they threw this week against the Chiefs cost me a cover in a game that the Chargers couldn't move the ball at all, and Patrick Mahomes gave them 7 points right off the bat. It was just not a pleasant time for me or anybody. But anyway, what do you think about the MVP race?
Well, I'm not gonna. I still think Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in football.
No question.
I admit he has to do more than this if he's going to win an MVP. It's just a question of, like, I'm really happy having him on my team because he's probably the best at winning Super Bowls, and being in the playoffs, he's just magic. But I'm actually checking to see if Aiden Hutchinson had any sacks this past week. Looks like he has 6.5.
He's still at 6.5, 6.5 last
That's what it
week.
was last week.
So I
Yeah.
guess he didn't have me last night.
Yep.
It's good.
But he was the one that I threw in there as a, hey, we don't always have to have quarterbacks and whatnot. I agree with you about Daniels, but I heard some people on VSiN talking about it. They were saying, I mean, they beat the Giants last week, and then they beat the Cardinals this week, and apparently statistically, at least last year and maybe so far this year, those are two of the bottom 5 or 10 off defenses rather in the NFL. So, again, I'm not trying to like find faults with him or anything. He's doing great, and I'm excited, but I don't expect him to put up numbers like he did last week, like the rest of the way, or the first 4 weeks or whatever. His completion percentage is great. Last I checked, he had 3 touchdown passes. That was coming into last week, and he got 1 or 2 more maybe. So he's
past 2 weeks, Jay Daniels has had 5 touchdowns and 6 incompletions.
But that includes rushing touchdowns, right? Because at
Right.
least 2 of them are rushing touchdowns. I'm pretty sure.
But 5 touchdowns and 6 incompletions.
Yep,
that's remarkable. This is the NFL. If it were college, I know they statistically have bad defenses, but this is the NFL, and he's just absolutely owning it. I thought C.J. Stroud last year was remarkable, but this year so far, Jaden Daniels is impressing me even more. So, interesting thing. Let's move to legit Super Bowl contenders. Last week, Kansas City was plus 450. This week, they're plus 600. That's the move without Rashee Rice. Certainly took a hit to their odds. San Francisco moved from plus 700, starting to get some healthy. The public starting to notice it, moved to plus 650. Baltimore is now at plus 850, jumped up a little bit after their really impressive win over Buffalo. Buffalo fell back with good reason, plus 800 to plus 1,000. Detroit jumped from plus 1,300 to plus 1,000. Green Bay fell from plus 2,000 to plus 2,500. The biggest jump, though, is that the public is finally catching on to Minnesota Vikings and believed them. They went from plus 3,000 last week. We talked about kind of jumping on them and taking a flyer and on a ticket on them to now they're plus 1,600. So still good value on them. Still think they're the most complete team and interesting odds. I quickly I added Baltimore back in. I still didn't believe in Baltimore. I believe in them a little bit more now. I'd like to see them against some competition. Not sure how good Buffalo is. Buffalo hasn't really beaten anybody. They played Arizona, Miami, and Jacksonville, and then they played Baltimore and got exposed. So we don't really know how good Buffalo actually is. But I quickly added them back in, or quickly added Baltimore in after their win over Buffalo. But we'll see how impressive that win is as we go along. Baltimore travels to Cincinnati this week. So should be interesting in that game. I'm not sure how interesting with Cincinnati's defense. But anyway, that's kind of where we are. But I just quietly removed the LA Rams, which I threw in there for a little bit of a flyer. I think they're done. I think they're just, it's just not, one times you have the year and other times you just don't. I think they're going to have times where they're just going to ruin somebody's betting card. It'd be a great time to play underdogs, but I just don't see them as a playoff team this year, especially as stacked as the NFC seems to be this year. Any ones I left off that you think that would be worthy of that contender list?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, maybe it's 4 weeks. I'm looking at teams with 3-1 records. I mean, you could go Tampa, Washington, Houston. I don't know. We'll know in a couple more weeks what we're looking at. If we still have a lot of teams with 1 loss in a couple weeks or 0 losses, that'll tell us something. But what just happened to Buffalo, that can happen to anybody this week too, and we just won't see it coming.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Last week I asked you a question again that you scoffed at, but I was early again, but I wasn't wrong. And I'm going to ask it to you again. Do the Washington Commanders have the best quarterback in the NFC East, and are they now the favorite for that division?
I don't know yet, and at the moment, yeah. I don't know. Their defense is so just hot.
It is terrible, terrible. But it's hard for me not to say that Jaden Daniels is not the best quarterback in that division.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's been 4 games, and he's been amazing. But I don't like. This is exactly how many games I think Anthony Richardson had last year when everybody thought he was going to be. He wasn't putting up these numbers by any
right.
But for a rookie, he was doing pretty well and affording himself well, and he looks lost this year. So
yeah, he was never accurate, but I mean, he's terribly inaccurate this year. I mean, he was never that great. That was the big hole in his game coming into the NFL, is that he wasn't really accurate in college. And could he be coached? I feel like Shane Steichen. I mean, I noticed your tweet that you put out on Sunday. You're like, hey, because you had the Colts, and you're like, my odds of winning the game just went up by the backup quarterback coming in. I thought that was classic.
I had Tennessee last night, and the same.
But completely accurate.
Yeah, the same thing happened with Mason Rudolph. Yeah.
Well, we talked about that last week. We talked about when is Brian Callahan going to play Mason Rudolph, and it turns out by necessity he played this week, and the odds of them winning went up. It was just a better. I mean, look. I mean, you can only give these new quarterbacks so much time. Look, I know you got to give them time to bake, and you can look at that by Justin Fields may be the example. Like, hey, not everybody comes into the NFL like C.J. Stroud and Jaden Daniels. Bo Nix and Caleb Williams, I think, are going to be fine quarterbacks. But Jaden Daniels and C.J. Stroud just may be,
I'm not so sure about Bo Nix, by the way.
Yeah, I think he's.
How many? They won. Do you know the number of how many yards he had passing?
I've got that. That's my one thing. We'll get to that. So we'll get that.
If you're going to be a pro, I'm not sure you can afford to have any game where you
totally understand.
Yeah,
but he did win the game, so we have to give him acknowledgement.
His defense won the game, but yeah,
totally. Last week we had 3 0-3 teams: Cincinnati, Tennessee, Jacksonville. Cincinnati and Jacksonville got off the schneid, and now we're left with 1 0-4 team that is just a mess. There was a tweet came out today. I don't know if it was Schefter or somebody, but they said that in the locker room that the team is out on Doug Peterson, that it is a mess. There are rumors that that the first call might be to Bill Belichick. That's the only team outside the Northeast that he might go to. He's got a home in Florida. I mean, obviously he's got as much money as he wants to. I mean, besides in Martha's Vineyard, but he does have a home in Florida, and that might be an opportunity for him to come back in to do it. But there may be another team that has another head coach opening soon as well. It may be a race to it, and that's the Philadelphia Eagles. So, it's getting ugly in that locker room. Jalen Hurts is completely out on him. I mean, they don't talk. He makes up his own plays. It's an odd scenario, and one that we'll kind of get into. Turning our attention to Week 5. This is the week that the buys start. We have the buys starting this week, and these continue for 10 weeks and stop after we get through Week 14. So that's something that we're going to be juggling at, something that you and I always look closely at. When looking at teams, what's your philosophy when it comes to teams going into a bye, coming off a bye? Do you handicap games differently because of that?
No, not really. unless somebody important comes back from after the bye week because they had 2 weeks to rest. I tracked it at one point. I used to think, well, going into a bye, maybe you'd be distracted and you'd lose, and coming out of the bye, you'd be rested and you'd win. And it just didn't. It just wasn't. I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't significant difference. Either way, going into or coming out of a bye wasn't a significant betting percentage. So I just trashed it.
Right. And I don't have percentages on this, but at least intuitively, what I have tracked and kept up with is that really, really good coaches coming off a bye week, they come in prepared and have a game plan. I mean, your Sean McVays, your Andy Reids, those people. And I look at that. And when you look at teams that have bye weeks this week, you've got the Chargers. I kind of expect Harbaugh. That team needs to get healthy. Will get healthy a little bit more so off the bye week. They need a bye week. Couldn't come soon enough for them. I expect Harbaugh to have a good game plan coming off the bye week when he comes off in week 6. Philadelphia couldn't come soon enough for them. They're very banged up, but I don't expect Nick Sirianni to have a particular good game plan. I think there's too much friction in the locker room. Detroit, be interesting to see what Dan Campbell comes up. I think Ben Johnson will have a good offensive game plan there. Should be interesting. They need some help. They've got a couple players that need to get healthy. Tennessee, Brian Callahan. I'm really anxious to watch him coming off that. Clearly, his first coming off a bye week as a head coach. So looking forward to seeing how he does this year. So I probably won't bet the game where he comes off the bye, but I'll be watching it closely just to see how he performs as a head coach coming off a bye. Really could tell us, how he's going to be as a head coach. Give us a little bit of an indication. I think he's stuck with Will Levis until he permanently sees the light and tries to go to Mason Rudolph, because Will Levis seems to be a losing proposition. People in the locker room don't like him. He doesn't seem to like him personally. So it'll be interesting to see. But, man, let's get into it.
Okay. Starting Thursday, we've got Tampa Bay 3-1 at Atlanta 2-2. Tampa coming off the win over Philadelphia 33-16. Atlanta coming off the win over New Orleans 26-24.
Yeah, Tampa Bay at 3-1, Atlanta 2-2. Really kind of the cream of the crop starting to rise in the NFC South, kind of where we thought it would be. We thought, New Orleans kind of surprise team. I feel like New Orleans kind of regressed back to where we kind of thought they'd be. The weather here is in a dome. My guess on this one was a total of 47, and I put Atlanta at -3. Kind of a give up on my part by putting the -3, but that's kind of what I thought. What is it actually?
The point spread, the total, you said 47, it opened 42.
Wow.
And it's 43.5 now.
Okay.
Point spread, you said -3, I said -2.5. It opened -2, it's down to 1.5 now.
Down to 1.5. Interesting. Okay. Have any thoughts on that game?
Not really. That's I'll be surprised if there's an overwhelming majority of bets on either side on that one.
Yeah.
The Falcons are a favorite, but at home, and they're giving 1.5, so it's less than 3 or 2 or whatever you consider home field for Atlanta to be. Just feels about right the way it is. But I'll see if somebody gets walloped with it.
Yeah, should be interesting. Looks like maybe a good game for me to tease on that game, but also potentially some live betting on this one just to see how it goes for action. On Atlanta, Caleb McGarry, he's questionable but considered day-to-day, should be good to go. Ray McLeod, questionable but should be good to go. He was a non-participant in Monday's practice, but probably be able to go. Bijan Robinson day-to-day, but because of his hamstring, probably good to go. Good news for Falcons fans on Troy Anderson. Just had a phenomenal day. I think he had 17 tackles in their last game, and interception. But Um, but Raheem Morris told reporters on Monday that Anderson's day-to-day with his knee injury, so probably expect him to go. We talked about this last week about their center, still injured reserve. He's not expected back till he was placed on there September 24th, so it'll be 4 weeks for he's out. So they've got some injuries, several there, banged up, a lot on defense, and be a little bit before they get full strength. Tampa Bay, really just two to speak of, and they're going to get some good news. Looks like Luke Gedke, offensive tackle, he's due back this week, and his list is questionable for this week, so good chance he could go. And they're going to get Jalen McMillan, wide receiver, back. He's questionable, but considered day-to-day on that one as well. So let's see. Trey Palmer, wide receivers, questionable. Everything else is good. Vita Vea obviously got back. Their injury list was just a laundry list of people. They got pretty beat up in the Philadelphia game, but I think people just took Monday off. Tuesday kind of cleared up quite a bit. So, again, looks pretty good. They're getting a defensive end back who is Ernest Brown IV, who was on injured reserve. They're getting him back this week. So that's an interesting thing. They're also getting Rakeem Jarrett, wide receiver, back, who is on injured reserve as well. So some good news for them as well. My thing, kind of one thing on this team this week, again, I thought Baker looked really good. He looked like, a great quarterback against the Eagles defense. But, again, I'm not sure how good the Eagles defense is going to be. They did limit. They came in with a 31st in run deficiency into the game against the Eagles, but held the Eagles to only 113 yards rushing, and they held Saquon under 100, which is pretty good. But the problem was they still gave up 5.7 yards per rush against a very one-dimensional Eagles team. So something to see there. Public may be jumping on Tampa because of their performance against Philadelphia, but Philadelphia seems to kind of like their mess. Anything you want to add to that?
Yep. No, I'm completely with you.
Okay.
I don't know what to make of this game right now. I'm just going to be following the betting trends and see what happens. Right now, the line's gone down a half point. My inclination was to believe that it would be about pick 'em, so it's heading that way, but we'll see.
Yeah.
It might just come down to missing, like just not even betting it, but we'll see. I mean, maybe the public really likes one of these two sides better than the other. I personally think Tampa's a better team, but
well, we'll certainly find out. Primetime teams, home teams, have been doing very well this year at covering the spread. So interesting. We'll see how that one plays out. But let's go to the next one.
Okay, next game is New York Jets. This is 9:30 a.m. This one is where is this one? Is it London?
This one is at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London. So this is our first of our international games. So get your popcorn, get up, set your alarms, get up early. We've got action in London. And the good news is that this week it's not the Jaguars we have to watch.
True. Although in London, they're pretty good.
They are good.
So we've got the New York Jets 2-2 at Minnesota 4-0. I'm going to warn you, I was way off on this one.
I may be off too.
Jets lost to Denver 10-9. Minnesota beat Green Bay 31-29.
Yeah, obviously I didn't cover the weather in the previous game because it's in a dome in Atlanta. So there is weather here. This stadium is built to where it covers the fans, but the pitch, as it'll be called over there, is completely open. So 67 degrees, 50% chance of rain, 8-mile-an-hour winds with up to 22-mile-an-hour gusts during the game. So be interesting there. Minnesota's 4-0, Jets 2-2. I put this game, I put a total at 43, and I put Minnesota favored by 4.5.
Okay. You said 43 for the total. The Jets, pardon me, it's 40 and a half is what it opened, and it's still at 40 and a half. So, not far off.
Yeah.
Minnesota, you said minus 4.5. I said 6.5. It opened 1.5, and it's now 2.5. It feels, when I saw this, I thought this looks like a sucker bet. They want people to hit Minnesota, and I don't understand why they would, but that might be what they're doing. I mean, but then again, I've heard from guys behind the behind the desk that say, we don't do that. We don't bait people. These are what our real power numbers are going to be, and that's what they say. So I don't. Now, granted, the Jets just looked really bad last week, and maybe I'm just getting a little recency bias, but I don't think they're in the league of Minnesota thus far this year. I'm not sure how you can rationalize them, but then again, I'm always on dogs and stuff all the time, so maybe I'll end up betting them after all. But I was really surprised. I can't believe they're basically saying the Jets are a better team on a neutral field, and that doesn't make sense to me. But again,
this essentially is a neutral field, right?
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm sorry. You're right. You're absolutely right. So technically, this is Minnesota's a 1.5 point better on the neutral field, which makes more sense.
Yeah,
but that's right. I forgot about that. Yep.
Yeah. So, yep. Look, Aaron Rodgers. One thing that I noticed for the Jets is that the Jets came into, or Aaron Rodgers did. He came into the game against the Broncos with the best third down percentage in the league at 57%. Real stat, definitely matters. Unfortunately, he only went 4 of 17 for 24%. Against the Jets. So I just not just fantastic on third downs. So I'm the third downs just didn't go that well. So I'm in a team not called the Patriots, who are just a terrible team. This is not good news for the Jets. Again, Minnesota comes in. Their one thing, again, it's most complete team. Still leads the NFL. They came in last week with 16 sacks in the NFL. They picked up one more sack against Green Bay. Green Bay did a good job holding them off, where they'd been averaging, over 5 sacks a game, and they only got one against Green Bay. Speaks to Green Bay's offensive line. But they still lead the NFL in sacks. Sam Darnold leads the NFL in TD passes and passer rating. Look, this is a real team, and should be interesting. So we can move on.
Okay. Next up is the first of the 1:00 games. Carolina 1-3 at Chicago 2-2. Carolina lost to Cincinnati 34-24, and Chicago beat the Rams 24-18.
First game, interesting. We're getting in a little bit of a weather in this game. It's 70 degrees, so that's not really the weather. Partly cloudy, but we are blowing in October. The winds are going to be 17 miles an hour, which is significant from the northwest. So that's something to take in mind when you're looking at betting this game. I've got the total in this one 37, and I put Chicago 5.5. That may be high, but that's what I put.
Okay, you said 37 on the total. It's open 42, and it is still 42. Yes.
Oh wow. Okay.
And as for the line, you said 5.5 on Chicago. I said 4.5. It opened 4.5. It's down to 4. So a little generous there, but.
Yeah.
I haven't thought Chicago's looked good any game this year, but somehow they're 2-2, and I don't understand it.
One of those was the Will Levis game.
Yeah. Which one?
Yeah, I get it. let's see, injuries, anything substantial here. Let's see. Looks like Carolina, Shy Tuttle, defensive tackle, questionable for the game. Guard Damian Lewis, questionable. Lonnie Johnson Jr., cornerback, questionable. Looks like they are getting back defensive tackle Jaden Crumedy. He's back, or is going to be back for the game. Had an ankle injury. They're getting back Ian Thomas, tight end, this week. So should be back. Also getting back Dane Jackson, obviously this Carolina cornerback from injured reserve. So they're starting to get a little healthy. But interesting, Shaq Thomas is doubtful. That'll hurt them. Another linebacker, Josie Jewell's, questionable. They've got some injuries. Chicago, Zach Pickens, defensive tackle, questionable. Tevin Jenkins, guard, questionable. He's already been ruled out. Anyway, Chicago looked better against Indianapolis, but what I think about Chicago is that the defensive head coaching staff is just going to ruin Caleb Williams' rookie season until they blow this coaching staff out and get a new coaching staff. Caleb Williams is not going to live up to his potential. You can see he's got kind of Russell Wilson-itis. Russell Wilson was great in Seattle but it was one read and then go create. Now that Russell can't run like he could, he can't create anymore. And that was a big deal with Sean Payton, of course, because he wouldn't go through his progressions. He'd go one read and then just bail. And you see that happening with Caleb Williams. It is one read, then go spin and create. And that's going to be a problem for him. And unfortunately, he's developing that bad habit here. It's a continuation of bad habit, one he had in college, and he's carried on in the NFL, but unfortunately just doesn't have Shane Waldron, the offensive coordinator, is just not coaching that out of him. And, unfortunately, until he gets an offensive coach that smooths out those rough edges, I think that's kind of where he is. Carolina, I think, has been a great story. I think that they're valued right now because they beat up on the Raiders, who seem to be on the verge of imploding internally. And Andy Dalton passed away against that horrible, miserable Cincinnati defense. So we will see how that works out against Chicago. Should be an interesting game. Right now, I lean under the total, and I lean towards Chicago. Any thoughts on that game at all? Or final thoughts before we move on?
No, that one, two very unimpressive teams. It's a pretty even matchup, even though I guessed that Chicago would be favored. But it's just, they both won at least one game, but they're both very unimpressive to me. I don't know how Chicago has 2 wins. I mean, you mentioned the Will Levis thing, but still, Caleb Williams hasn't looked particularly great. He certainly doesn't look as bad as Bryce Young, but this one is just. I mean, it's kind of discouraging how we're at a stage where we're seeing guys like Mason Rudolph and Joe Flacco and Andy Dalton come in and take the place of young quarterbacks, and they're night and day better than the guys they're replacing, and they're old as hell. It's a little discouraging. So if it was Carolina with Bryce Young, I'd have an opinion, but Carolina with Andy Dalton is the number's probably about right.
Yep.
I just don't think these teams are any good, either one of them. So,
yep.
We'll see if the public feels otherwise. Next up is Baltimore 2-2 at Cincinnati 1-3. Baltimore beat Buffalo 35-10. Cincinnati beat Carolina 34-24.
Yeah, weather in this one is perfect. In Cincinnati, going to be 76 degrees, clear, 8 miles an hour wind from the southwest. I put this one at a total of 46, and I put Cincinnati at +1.5.
Cincinnati +1.5?
I did.
Okay, so Baltimore -1.5. Okay, total you said 46. It opened 51.5, and it is down to 50.5. As for the line, you said Baltimore -1.5. I said Baltimore -3.5. It opened 2.5, and it's still there. So we surrounded it pretty much there.
Okay.
Should be a good game though.
Yeah, should be. Looks like Baltimore may be getting a couple people back from injured reserve. Arthur Millette, cornerback, is getting back from injured reserve from a knee injury. John Harbaugh told reporters that he will practice this week. They're getting Rasheen Ali, a running back. Not that he need any more help at running back, but he's been on injured reserve coming back. Let's see, Cincinnati. Cincinnati's getting a little bit healthy. Got Sheldon Rankins, defensive tackle, questionable. Tanner Hudson, tight end, questionable. And B.J. Hill, defensive tackle, questionable. But McKinley Jackson is coming back off injured reserve. Head coach Zach Taylor told reporters Monday that the Bengals will open Jackson's 21-day practice window closer to Wednesday. So I don't know if Wednesday they'll get him back in time, but maybe Miles Murphy, defensive end, maybe this will help their terrible defense. Maybe get a pass rush because they haven't been getting a pass rush. Maybe these two additions will actually help them. It's coming back off injured reserve. He's going to open Zach Taylor's going to open his 21-day practice window closer to Wednesday as well. So tomorrow. And but Trey Hendrickson, the only pass rush they've got, said he's questionable for the game. Said he's dealing with a neck stinger. So some good news and some kind of not so good news on that one. Look, Baltimore looked like the real deal, against Buffalo. But, again, we thought Buffalo was the real deal, and are they really? And I guess we'll start to find out as Baltimore goes into division games. Cincinnati, I will say, outscored Carolina, but outscoring Carolina is not impressive. They still got a problem with the defense. Anything you want to add to that? Final comment?
No. I think that's good. I'm looking forward to this one. I know that it's 2-2 against 1-3, but
Yep,
they should be near the top of their division at the end of the year, and
sure.
we'll see. Okay.
Yep.
Next, Buffalo 3-1 at Houston 3-1. This is a good one. Buffalo losing to Baltimore 35-10. Houston coming off the win against Jacksonville 24-20, unfortunately for me.
Yeah, right. Weather's dome, so no weather there. My guess was 49 points and Houston -2.
49 points?
Uh-huh.
Okay, and -2. Okay, this one the total you said 49. It opened 46.5. It's still 46.5. And it's gone up to 47.5 in the last 12 hours or whatever. And the line you said Buffalo -2. And
Houston.
I said
Houston.
Okay, good. Then you made the same mistake I did. It is there we go. You said Houston -2. I said Houston -2. It opened Pick'em and it's now Buffalo -1.
Really?
Yep.
Huh. Interesting on that one. the big thing for Houston, Joe Mixon's going to return this week. So they should be able to pick up a pass rush from Buffalo. Certainly my initial thoughts, and Buffalo is just not really getting a pass rush. It took Sean McDermott frustratingly till the second half till he actually blitzed Lamar Jackson and tried to knock him off his spot and slow them down. He was steadily just picking them apart. It was really frustrating to watch. Kind of an odd thing as well. Very first drive of the game, it's 0-0, 4th and 1 on his 39. He goes for it and gets it. Third quarter, he's behind 14-3. It's the same thing. It's 4th and 1 from his own 39, and he punts. And his conservatism is, and a lot of other reasons I think is really holding him back. I've never been a Sean McDermott guy. He's going to have some games where he proves me wrong, but overall, they're wasting Josh Allen's prime years. I thought this looked like one of the best teams they've had, but after watching Arizona, after watching Miami, and after watching Jacksonville, his first 3 weeks they don't look that impressive. The wins don't anymore. Looking at injury reports for Buffalo first, you've got Khalil Shakir, wide receiver, got ankle soreness running games. It is questionable. Taron Jackson, cornerback, still not sure if Sean McDermott's still not sure if he'll return to practice this week. Doesn't practice, he won't play. Terrell Bernard, linebacker, is questionable, but he's returning to practice this week, so hopefully he'll play for Buffalo. Taylor Rapp downgraded to out because the concussion he sustained against the Ravens trying to tackle Derrick Henry. I don't really see anything. Darrington Evans, running back, he's placed on injured reserve. He's due to come back. Designated return came back today, so that's good. Houston, safety Jimmy Ward's questionable. Running back Damian Pierce is questionable, and Joe Mixon's questionable, but all are expected to place, as well as Tank Dell. Laramie Tunsil left the game against Jacksonville due to an ankle injury, is questionable return. So we'll have to watch that one closely. I mean, he's just a massive human and a phenomenal left tackle. Just we'll see if he's going to play or not. Let's see. They're going to get Dylan Horton back. Let's see. No, sorry. I'm sorry. He's out. He was placed on the injured reserve. I don't see anything else. No, that's it for me. So I think this could be an interesting game for CJ Stroud. I'm leaning toward the underdog in this game. It feels like a game with Joe Mixon back and be able to pick up the blitz. Feels like a better opportunity for Houston. But any thoughts on that game?
I think that's going to be a hell of a game. I personally liked Buffalo coming into the season better than Houston, although I liked Houston, but I just didn't think I thought they might take a slight step back this year.
Right.
I think Buffalo coming off that humiliation is in a pretty good spot right here.
Okay.
I'll say that.
Yeah.
Okay, next one is Indianapolis 2-2 at Jacksonville 0-4. Indianapolis coming off the win over Pittsburgh 27-24. Jacksonville off the loss to Houston 24-20.
Weather 79, rain showers, 13 miles an hour wind. Rain showers likely, 13 miles an hour from the northeast. I'm guessing I put Jacksonville at -1.5, and I put a total at 46.
Okay, I had the wrong team favored. You got the right team favored. I thought Indy was visibly a better team to me.
Okay.
But anyway, total open, you said 46. It opened 45.5. It is 46, couple 46 and a halfs out there. Line, you said Jacksonville -1.5. I said Indy -3. That was probably a little ambitious, I guess. I should have stayed below 3. Open 2.5. It's still 2.5 Jacksonville. So you're Jacksonville even more than you thought. Now, please explain that one to me. I know Indy's not that great, but with any luck, Flacco's still quarterbacking. And Jacksonville's 0-4. They finally put up a decent effort last week and still managed to lose it in the end. And you're talking about their locker room in full rebellion. But
Yeah.
why are they favored in this game? I don't get it. I
know. I think that it's probably more to. We'll look at. Let's look at the injury report with Indianapolis. Looks like Richard's considered day-to-day with no oblique and abdominal strains. So not sure about that. Taquan Lewis was placed on injured reserve this week, defensive end for Indianapolis. The other defensive end, Kwity Paye, is questionable. Kenny Moore, cornerback's questionable. Ryan Kelly, center, questionable for Indianapolis. And Jonathan Taylor, questionable as well. Coach said the Colts are not considering injured reserve as an option for Taylor, who sustained a mild high ankle sprain during Sunday's win over the Steelers. They're not considering it, but if it was even on the table, so maybe that's the reason. Maybe Jonathan Taylor may not play, and probably won't play in this game. Maybe it's going to be a Joe Flacco game. We'll see. Cameron McGrone, linebacker, sustained dislocated elbow during training camps, set to come off injured reserve. They've got a defensive end, Samson Ebugam, defensive end, coming off injured reserve this week as well for Indianapolis. Jacksonville, they've got a Darnell Savage, safety, questionable. Devin Lloyd, linebacker, questionable. Evan Ingram, questionable. Josh Hines-Allen, questionable. It said that Josh Hines-Allen suffered a concussion during the loss to Texans. So we'll see. That's a big one if he can't play, obviously. So other than that, let's see. Andrew Wingard, their safety, he's coming off IR, supposed to come back. And Kellen Robinson, running back, is coming up off injured reserve as well. So got a little bit there to come off, but some doubt when it comes to Josh Hines-Allen, as well as for Jacksonville, as well as potentially Jonathan Taylor for the Colts. So maybe that's where the line's vacillating right now. But kind of found out some news right now that we've kind of wondered why Trevor Lawrence, not that passionate about football, as the rumor been, and also and I asked one of my sources, I was just like, what's going on with Trevor Lawrence? What's happening with him? And I was told this week that it's not well known, but that his wife basically runs him and tells him what to do. And that's the personality. And basically that, it may end up being a similar situation to kind of Andrew Luck, because Andrew Luck's wife was supposedly the exact same way. And she's the one who made Andrew Luck retire from football. So it kind of answered some questions for me about Trevor, because again, this is the mystery. This is the Rubik's Cube I can't seem to solve, because you and I see this all world talent and like, what is going on there? So Any of that surprise you? You're muted.
Dogs were barking. I guess a little. I'm not. I mean, he has the temperament of a man who could be like that, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. If you're a football player and you got to spend, first in the building, last out kind of situation, you're watching tape, and in the off season you're working out, and you're doing all this kind of stuff. You kind of have to have, a partner who's going to be running most of the rest of your life, and that sometimes can. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I in other words, I'm not 100% sure that's the explanation. I don't love the receivers. And he hasn't been good. I'm not suggesting it's just that. It's just something's off. But I've seen enough of him to know that he can do it. And I don't know. I don't know if I want to get between his ears and try to pretend or try to judge that that's what the problem is exactly.
Yeah.
But unless he's stupid, that's different. But just in terms of like, well, his wife runs the show. Well, that's the kind of thing that sounds like comes out of a locker room because guys are used to treating women like garbage, maybe. And
It could, but I mean, you
got to be
want
alpha male in your home, Trevor, and he's like, well, I'm just not that way or whatever.
you kind of want your quarterback to be an alpha, though, right?
Well, yeah, but it's one thing if I don't know. I mean, I'm just
be an
saying,
alpha, not be a jerk.
right? But all I mean is that if that perception doesn't necessarily mean that when she walks into the locker room, she goes, Trevor, we're leaving. And then he just goes, yes, dear. I mean, it makes it sound like he's just this meek guy, but
yeah,
that might not be
he doesn't really, he's not real vocal on the field. And
that's just him though.
Oh, I know. But I mean, you need you kind of need a vocal leader.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be your quarterback. It could be your Ray Lewis, if you got Joe Flacco behind center.
You kind of do need a quarterback who people can get behind and follow. But right now, as we mentioned, or that the tweet we saw earlier, that it does look like the Ravens or the Jacksonville locker room has turned on Doug Peterson. Really interesting to see how that turns out. So it's kind of a volatile situation, but let's move on, man.
Okay, next one is Miami 1-3 at New England 1-3. Oh boy. Miami coming off the loss to Tennessee 31-12. New England coming off a loss to San Francisco 30-13. Good luck. Yeah,
it's 64 degrees, slight chance of showers. And I mean slight as in like 1%, and winds from the northeast at 6 miles an hour. My guess was I did a bailout. As far as the line, I put New England -3, and I put a total of 35.
Okay. Yeah, we both have issues on this one a little bit. You said 35 on the total. It opened 36.5. It is now down to. Sorry, I just had to correct the line a second ago. So
yep, all good.
35.5 still, 35.5. So it's gone down down to just a little above where you were.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the point spread opened. I said Jacksonville -1.5.
No, we're at Miami, New England.
I'm sorry. I said New England. I've said New England -1.5. I'm sorry. Miami -1.5. I beg your pardon. And you said New England -3. It opened pick'em, and it's now New England -1. So we kind of surrounded that one as well. Although I was on the wrong side, but yeah, I remember when I saw that game when I was filling this out yesterday, and I just was like, what, Miami with who? Huntley again against New England with Brissett, and ever since after that shocking week 1 victory, they've looked like hell every week.
I have a stat that I think will matter to this game. It's one stat, and I think it matters to this game. But first of all, let me cover injuries real quick. Let me look at Miami. Skylar Thompson's questionable. Raheem Mostert's questionable. Kendall Fuller, cornerback's questionable. Terran Armstead, offensive tackle, questionable. Safety Jordan Poyer is questionable. Said he's been actually. Let's see. He was ruled out. Played part of the game. It's questionable for this week. Jalen Phillips, linebacker, questionable. I'm sure there'll be some other things because these just came out today. I mean, it's a little early to get true injury reports on Miami until maybe a couple more days. Let's see. Odell Beckham Jr. is actually supposed to come back. Who's had an unspecified off-season procedure. He's supposed to come back this week. Bradley Chubb is supposed to come back this week. So we'll see if he's able to play. And then you also have safety Patrick Morris that was placed on injured reserve because of a foot. Is supposed to come off injured reserve. Several people come off injured reserve for Miami this week. Cam Smith, cornerback, as well as offensive tackle Isaiah Wynn. And then also linebacker Cameron Good. So you're going to have considerable help on the defensive line or defensive staff come back from Miami this week. Good news for Miami. They certainly haven't looked good. With New England, David Andrews, center's questionable. He's getting multiple medical opinions on his shoulder injury, which he suffered in the loss to the 49ers before deciding his path to recovery. That doesn't sound good. Kyle Duggar, safety, said he'd likely avoided serious injury and is questionable for the game this coming week. Vidarian Lowe, offensive tackle, questionable. Michael Jordan, guard, questionable. Anthony Jennings, linebacker, questionable. And Caden Wallace, offensive tackle, questionable. Said he was using crutches, wearing a boot on his left foot. So we'll have to pay attention to that one. And Kendrick Bourne, wide receiver, actually he's coming off injured reserve. His practice window is opening, so they're getting a little help there. Let's see, Christian Barmore, defensive tackle, coming off injured reserve. So he's been treated for blood clots. Well, no, he's just coming off, but they still don't think he's going to play this season. So anyway, not real good. Can't say it's a great game. Not sure that I would play it, but the one stat I have about this game that I thought was interesting, and the only stat I think that is somewhat telling about this game is that Mike McDaniel is 1-6 straight up as a coach without Tua. And Tua won't be playing here, and it's at New England. So if I'm playing anything, I'm playing New England this weekend.
Okay. All righty. Next one is the last of the 1 o'clock games. It is Cleveland 1-3 at Washington 3-1. Cleveland coming off the loss to Las Vegas 20-16, and Washington coming off a win over Arizona 42-14.
Okay. Weather in this one, 64 degrees, 3% chance of showers, winds out of the southeast at 6 miles an hour, so no big deal there. I put a total at 47, and I put a spread at 5.5 toward Washington.
Okay, total you said 47. It opened 45. It's down to 44.5. Point spread, you said, well, yeah, I was just a little surprised about this. You said Washington 5.5. I said Washington 7. Maybe I was a little high there. Open 3, still 3.
Interesting.
Again, I would have thought recency bias would have made my guess or your guess the better guess than what really came out. But
Look, Cleveland looked completely disinterested in playing the other day. Deshaun Watson, he looks maybe a backup. You know, when are they going to go to a backup quarterback there in Cleveland? Amari Cooper seemed disinterested. I saw him drop the ball. One just bounced off him, went as an interception. I'm just like, what is going on there in Cleveland? I mean, it's just
he's always been that guy though.
yeah.
He's always had that drop
Yep.
system. Yeah.
Yeah. Ownership's a mess there in Cleveland. The GM and the coach are good. I'm high on them, but you know, you're handcuffed with Deshaun Watson. Washington seems like a team that's certainly on the rise. Really, really, really interesting in that one. There's no way. Again, I'm putting good money on Cleveland. I'm just not. And maybe that's the turning point. Maybe that's the point where actually you jump in there and bet on them because, you know, when people won't bet, that's kind of when you do bet. But I just can't even imagine it. Let's see, Washington. They're getting Marcus Mariota back at backup back this week. They are also getting linebacker Jordan McGee back from injured reserve this week. Everybody else is questionable. Nothing big there. Like probably Austin Eckler will come back this week. If you look at Cleveland is what does their injury report look like? It looks like let's see, Jordan Hicks, linebacker, questionable. Their center's questionable. Nick Chubb has been ruled out. He's going to open his practice window this week, but not sure he'll play. David Njoku is questionable, so he may come back this week, which would be good for them. But still not at really full strength. I don't see anybody else they're getting back. May get Mike Hall Jr. back, defensive tackle, been on injured reserve. Or actually, he was, had a neck injury. So, but other than that, that's about it. It's about as much as I want to talk about Cleveland.
Okay. First of the 4 o'clock games is the 4:05 window. Las Vegas 2-2 at Denver 2-2.
Yep.
Vegas coming off the win over Cleveland 20-16, and Denver coming off the win over the Jets 10-9. Oof.
Sure. Weather on this one's 83, clear. Great weather in Denver, right? 6 miles an hour from the southeast. My guess on this one was Denver -1 and a total of 41.
Okay. You said 41, total open 37. It is down to 36 at the moment.
That's about right.
You said Denver -1. I said Denver -2.5. It opened 1, and it's up to 3 now.
3, yeah. Interesting enough, like I said, the news came out today that Davante Adams has officially requested a trade, and he may not play another game for Las Vegas. So really interesting. The locker room situation there seems bad. Surprisingly, you and I talked about this till we're blue in the face. Everybody loves the substitute teacher, right? They loved Antonio Pierce last year. You know, Max Crosby's going to quit or going to request a trade if he's not hired as a coach. And now, guess what? The locker room's a mess, and Davante Adams wants out. You know, after not this week's game, but the week before when they got beat by Carolina, Antonio Pierce comes out and said, some people made some business decisions today in the loss. We're going to make some business decisions. And you just start creating a lot of chaos, right? Like that. And so, people hated Bill Belichick for the way he answered reporters, but he gave them nothing. And afraid Antonio Pierce gave them too much, and his ego wouldn't let him get in the way, and his inexperience as head coach kind of showed. So, interesting deal. For me, be hard for me to go with the Raiders on this one, but also equally hard to go with Denver the way they played as well. Their defense looks great, but beyond that, not super impressed. All right, moving on.
Yeah, next game.
And Denver, my one thing about Denver was the thing you were about to mention. Bo Nix was 12 of 25 for a total of 60 yards in the game against the Jets for an average of 2.4 yards per completion.
Yep. I've yet to see him play a game where I thought, okay, this guy's going to stay in the NFL for more than like 3 years.
It's early.
This year, lose his job, end up as a backup for 2 or 3 years, like Zach Wilson, and then out the door.
It's early. He's early. He's got Sean Payton, and they need a better roster. So
that's true, but
just let him bake. Let these young guys bake a little bit.
I think I could have got 60 yards against that defense.
Now I don't. That being said, I don't know if Anthony Richardson is fixable, but I think somebody who is as accurate as Bo Nix, I'll invest some time in.
Okay. Next game is the last of the 4 o'clock games. It's Arizona 1-3 at San Francisco 2-2. Arizona coming off the loss to Washington 42-14. San Francisco beat New England 30-13.
Sorry about that. Got a little anxious. Sorry to talk over you. Weather in this one again, clear, but just great in the Bay Area for a great day. 81 degrees, clear. Winds out northwest 6 miles an hour. I put San Francisco. A little unsure about this one. I kind of waffled on not on the total, but on the side. I put the total at 47, and I put San Francisco at -4.5.
Okay, total. You said 47. It opened 50. It's still 50. See a couple 49.5s out there.
Okay.
San Francisco, you said 4.5. San Francisco -4.5. I said -6. It opened 7, and it's up to 7.5 now.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
Interesting. I somewhat understand that. Interesting thing about the 49ers is they still seem like the 49ers. I mean, even Brock Purdy, even without his weapons, and I'm hearing rumors that Christian McCaffrey, he may be out the entire year. He has got tendonitis in both Achilles. We talked about last week, flew to Germany. When you're flying to Germany to see the specialist in the entire world, there's a problem, right? And so, but even without all his weapons, and San Francisco is starting to get healthy again. San Francisco leads the NFL in time of possession, even without their weapons. So, really interesting game. 7.5 sounds a little rich, especially for a division game. But I would imagine after Washington went down and handed it to the Cardinals, that's probably reflective of the line. And of course, New England got the brunt of the 49ers this past weekend, which, kind of a disparity between the two, which probably has created the line.
Yep. Yeah. We'll see how the betting splits go, but I'm a big home dog fan. So a division dog fan. So,
yep.
My inclination is leaning at Arizona already, but we'll see how it goes.
Sure.
Okay, the first of the 425 games, you got Green Bay 2-2 at the LA Rams 1-3. Green Bay coming off the loss to Minnesota 31-29, and the Rams coming off the loss to Chicago 24-18.
This, of course, is in SoFi, so it's a dome, so no weather. My guess on this one, I've got the Rams -2.5, and I've got a total of 45.
Okay, you got the wrong team favored. We'll Starting
I
with the
figured.
total 45. It opened 45, and it is up to 48 now.
Wow.
You
Okay.
said Rams 2.5. I said Green Bay 2.5. It opened Green Bay 4, and it's down to 3.5, and there are a couple threes out there as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else you want on that one?
Yeah, I mean nothing really big. Just to me that kind of the odd stat of the week that Green Bay is 2-0 with Malik Willis and 0-2 with Jordan Love.
Yeah, it's true. Who'd have thought that?
Yeah, right.
All right. Next one is the last of the 425 games, which is the New York Giants at Seattle. New York Giants 1-3, Seattle 3-1. Giants coming off the loss to Dallas 20-15, and Seattle coming off the loss to Detroit 42-29. Obviously, the Giants and Dallas are coming off long rest this week. Dallas is going to be the next game we talk about. So,
sure. Look, this one is in Seattle. There's always a chance of rain, but a really small one this time. Only 10% chance of rain. 64 degrees. We're starting to see all the 60s in the degrees now. So, turning to October, we're starting to get the influx of weather a little chill in there. Starting to really get true football weather. Winds only 7 miles an hour from the southwest, so not a big deal. But nice to see these temperatures coming down. Start to see some wind developing a little bit in a couple places. My guess on this one, I took Seattle. I took Seattle minus 6.5, and I put a total at 45.
okay. You said 45 on the total. It opened 41. It's up to 43.5. You said Seattle 6.5. I said Seattle 7.5. It opened 6, and it is still 6. So you won that one.
Okay. Look, I don't know about you. If you stayed up and watched all the game last night, but with Seattle and Detroit, but I was never more impressed with a team that lost the game than Seattle. Seattle was without their top 4 pass rushers, and still came close to winning the game against Detroit. Gave them all they could right down the very end. I thought Geno Smith looked fantastic. Geno Smith leads the NFL in passing yards, and he's second in completion percentage. He was dealing. They are super impressive. And I like the Giants. I mean, the Giants O-line last year, how it was atrocious. This year looks good. They're playing well. Got an amazing left tackle, and they have their number 1 receiver, Malik Neighbors. Let me check the injury report to see how that looks for him. Let's see. He is your Giants. Malik Neighbors questionable. Just said he's still questionable. Nothing big deal. Dory Jackson questionable, so he's potentially coming back. Cornerback Drew Phillips questionable as well, so maybe they get some help back on cornerback. They are getting Deontay Johnson back at linebacker. He's coming off injured reserve. Also getting Austin Schlottman, their center back, from injured reserve. He had a leg injury, so that's good. Also getting linebacker Matthew Adams, linebacker back. He had a groin injury from injured reserve as well. So Giants are getting a little, kind of sneakily healthy and could be kind of a frisky dog in some situation. And those you kind of look at, obviously a long trip over the West Coast, but they don't battle the time zone like you do from the west to the east. But in Seattle, obviously coming off a short week. You're muted.
Sorry, the dogs have been going nuts for the last few
That's
minutes.
all right.
Okay, next one is the Sunday night game. And
Yep.
get ready for a lot of vintage footage of Roger Staubach and Lynn Swan and Jack Ham and Jack Lambert and
Why
Preston
not?
Pearson and all this. It's Dallas 2-2 at Pittsburgh 3-1.
Yep.
Dallas coming off the win against the Giants 20-15. Pittsburgh coming off the loss to Indianapolis 27-24.
Yeah. This one obviously played outdoors in Pittsburgh, as it should be. Temperature 68 degrees, 57% chance of rain showers, one of the better chances we've got. So could be a Sunday night game in the rain, kind of a cool rain, and winds out of the southwest, 7 miles an hour. I put this one at a total of 41, and I put Pittsburgh at a -2.5.
Okay, you said 41. It opened 42, and it's up to 43. And you said 2.5 Pittsburgh. I said 3.5. It opened 1.5, and it's up to 2.5. Should be a fun one. We'll see.
Yeah, should be. You have any initial thoughts on the game?
Well, I'll be interested to see if Dallas doesn't show a little now. They're 2-2. It's not like they're mathematically eliminated or close to it, but they need to get a little bit of mojo back at some point. And I still think that Pittsburgh, even coming off the loss last week, is still a average team, maybe. Dallas may be an average team too, but they have some really good players. They're clearly not as good as the sum of their parts at the moment.
Yeah.
So we'll see. It'd be interesting.
Well, look, the teams are just really decimated by injuries. Obviously, you've got Micah Parsons potentially probably being out for this game. You got DeMarcus Lawrence, got a Liz Frank injury, 4 to 8 weeks for him. They're two most dominating people on defense out. Pittsburgh just lost their rookie guard, James Daniels, out for the season. That's the third starting offensive lineman Pittsburgh's lost for the entire season. So pretty decimated there. Kind of an odd deal. Pittsburgh's got other injuries. Running back for Daryl Patterson. He left the game against Colts with an ankle injury and is questionable for this. They are getting back defensive tackle Logan Lee and linebacker Cole Holcomb, as well as linebacker Jeremiah Moon and Dylan Cook, offensive tackle, off injured reserve. So getting some big additions back from that, but certainly, tough. They've got another guard, Isaac Suimala, and he is questionable, but has with a pectoral injury has a chance to play. Linebacker Alex Highsmith is out for this game with a groin injury, and of course the endless saga of Russell Wilson may or may not be back for this game. So we'll see about that one. But interesting game. Any final thoughts on that one before we move on?
No, that's good.
Okay.
Okay, next one is New Orleans 2-2 at Kansas City 4-0. New Orleans coming off the loss to Atlanta 26-24. Kansas City coming off the win over the Chargers 17-10.
Yeah. Weather in Kansas City, again in the 60s, 67, clear, 5 miles per hour, very tame for Kansas City. Probably won't be that way in a couple months. Tough for me to handicap this one with a deal with Rashee Rice, but what I did with this one, I put the total at 43, and I'm guessing that Kansas City's favored. I put 4.5. That's probably a little light, but that's what I thought.
Okay. The total, you said 43. It opened 42. It is 42.5 now. And the line, you said Kansas City 4.5. I said Kansas City 6. It's Kansas City 5, and it is still 5.
Okay.
One thing I heard about Rashee Rice, everybody on Monday was talking about how he's out for the year with an ACL, but they did the MRI, and it was inconclusive, which is the best news Kansas City could have. Doesn't mean there's nothing wrong. Just means that they didn't find what they were worried they would find.
That's great.
The first time. So
Great news on that.
he obviously
one.
won't be there this week, you should think, but
Yeah,
he might not be out for the year either. So we'll see.
yeah. Interesting stat about Kansas City: haven't scored 30 points in 9 consecutive games. Longest streak in the Patrick Mahomes era.
Still won a Super Bowl in those 9 games, though.
Yeah, he has. Derek Carr again came back to earth against Atlanta when he was pressured. That's Achilles' heel for him against the blitz. He was 1 for 6 for 6 yards with an interception. So back to being the regular Derek Carr. Now we kind of look back at Carolina, just terrible at the very beginning, without a viable quarterback, kind of makes the team give up, especially when you go 3 and out. The defense just kind of gives up. I think Bryce Young's very first throw was an interception in that game, and it just got kind of worse from there. And then New Orleans played Dallas, who clearly beat up a bad Cleveland team, who anybody can beat up apparently. And, and who is really is Dallas now that New Orleans is starting to play tougher competition, played Atlanta, and prior to that played Philadelphia, not faring so well. So interesting to see how Kansas City does, what they're, obviously clearly got Jason Kelce more involved, or not Jason, Travis Kelce more involved in the game plan. I'm going to look at the injury report real quick for Kansas City so that I can see what they have or don't have available, and if anything is new. Just the same thing. Latest injury report yet confirmed. Nothing yet confirmed on the severity of injury. None of the tests have confirmed that. Just like you had said. Looks like Clyde Edwards-Helaire is coming back from a non-football illness, whatever that was. He's coming back.
I think it was a mental health issue.
Okay.
I read
All right.
that. Yeah.
And okay, good to know. B.J. Thompson, defensive end, coming back from injured reserve, and defensive end Charles Omenihu is coming back as well. So starting to get some people healthy, but certainly have some key injuries at some really tough spots. So it'll be interesting to see. You're obviously follow Kansas City very closely. Any thoughts on Kansas City or this game in general?
Glad to have Omenihu back. He was the opposite defensive end from George Karlaftis, I think, last year, or maybe they were in a rotation on the same side. Karlaftis has been a starter this year. Omenihu was a big loss. They lost him during the playoffs to an ACL, so I'm glad to see him back this quickly because he had a really good year last year, and it just makes the defense that much better. He's not some so-so player. He was really good last year, so that should help him.
Yeah. Matt, I think that's it for us.
Good stuff. Any final words before we take off?
Yeah, Smooth Andy. Anything for the people? Yeah. You're the reigning champ this week. You went 7-3. Just absolutely crushed me, and I got crushed by the man. And I'm faking a smile right now to smile through it, but this is a smile of determination to get back on track. What are your thoughts for the people?
Well, one thing that struck me, especially once we got past Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Buffalo, Houston, but there's some awful games this week. I'm serious. Carolina, Chicago, who wants to see it?
Agreed.
Indianapolis, Jacksonville, who wants to see that? Miami, New England, who wants to see that? Vegas, Denver, who wants to see that? New York Giants, well, Seattle's pretty good. So, but there's just a bunch of these games where I'm like, oh God. There's 40-year-old backup quarterbacks starting and 20-year-old quarterbacks you can't play starting and all kinds of stuff in between. So
Right. Yeah, interesting deal. Should be an interesting week. But as always, there's always money to be made, and that's what we're looking for. So anyway, for Matt, who hosts the show, for Smooth Andy, the reigning champ, NFL champ for this week, also known as the football quant, and a lover of Everton, and for me, I'm Uncle Phil. I am a square loser for Sunday, and I'm done with the emotional cutting, and I've turned the page, and I'm ready to roll this weekend. So, guys, thanks for tuning in, and as always, guys, let's roll.